We're continuing our discussion about defining the research problem. So we're taking issues and opportunities within an organization and turning it into a research project. We need to recognize the problem or the opportunity, and often that's not clear and has to be probed and dug deeper to make sure the focus is really what would inform decisions for the organization. So we need to find out what information is being sought. We need to understand the decision-making environment. We need to explore possible opportunity or different the context, explore the opportunities and what's happening. We also need to look at the symptoms and recognize that the people within the organization might focus on just a small handful of symptoms and not see that bigger picture. So we want to dig deeper and explore to make sure we get to the real heart of the matter. The key here in all of this is to be able to translate that management issue into something that data can be collected and analyzed for, and then so it can be a research problem. And so we want to go in this video create this, how do we turn it from that issue or that problem or opportunity that the organization is having into something that we can research so that decisions can be made. So let me just scroll through here. We are here. Translate the management problem. So when we talk about a management decision problem, this is a statement specifying the type of action. And so it's managerial action here if it's a management decision problem, but the decision problem is a statement specifying the type of action required to solve the problem. So what we're getting to at the heart of is what is the decision that needs to be made? What actions are we considering to be taken? And so we're specifying that what information we're going to need in order to solve a problem, make a decision that will lead to action. Now, when we talk about these identifying the management decision problem, we're working with our client to figure out what it is they really want to know. We talked about, how should Coke have known to ask a different question than win the taste test. So we're exploring with them what actions they're going to take, what decision is they're really considering. So we're looking at all those clues, all that context to help understand the underlying problem. Now, when it comes to those management decision problems, the statement specifying the type of action required to solve the problem, those actions can be discovery-oriented or strategy-oriented. Now, discovery-oriented decision problems are decision problems that seek to answer what or why questions about a problem or opportunity. So they focus on generating useful information. So, for example, what proportion of potato chips are eaten at meals? In comparison, a strategy-oriented decision problem is a decision problem that answers the question how about a problem or opportunity. So it's focusing on selecting alternative courses of action. How can we advertise our potato chips for consumption with meals? So which orientation should you go with? Well, the challenge with the discovery-oriented, if they're simply asking for information, so we're basically saying, get us information as part of this research project. The problem is that facts on their own don't necessarily lead to good decisions. So really we want is more of a strategy-oriented decision problem. So we're writing out this statement specifying the type of action required to solve the problem. And so we want the research question to really answer a how. How can we do something as opposed to just a statement of facts? It instead then looks at actions itself. So we want to move towards more of a strategy-oriented decision problem if possible. Although if you have an unplanned change you're dealing with, then you might be more discovery-oriented. Now, it doesn't mean that in your research project you're not collecting data, right? We talked about descriptive analytics is really just collecting facts and information explaining what is happening. Yes, we want that, but we want it to help us inform a strategy or how we're going to move forward. Okay, now an example of, so let's look at how we can take our management problem and turn it into a research problem. So I'm just going to define this research problem here, and then we'll work through an example. So our marketing research problem is going to be a statement that specifies, kind of forgot half that word there, specifying the type of info needed by the decision maker to solve the management decision problem. Not only does it include the type of information, but it's also going to include how the information is going to be obtained. So typically you'll create a problem statement that turns the management decision problem into a marketing research problem. So your problem statement is going to recognize the company, division, principles involved, the symptoms that they're observing, and possible causes of those symptoms. They're going to help to narrow down the research. We're going to be focusing on these particular issues and identify anticipated use of the information that we've obtained. So the management decision problem is going to be a lot more generic, more general, broad in scope, and your marketing research or your research problem is going to be much more narrowed. So just to kind of help figure out what it is all these words really mean. So our management decision problem, right? Statement specifying the type of action required to solve the problem can be more discovery, what and why, or more strategy as to how. And we're going to convert this into a research problem, which specifies the type of information, how it's going to be obtained, and so let's look at how this would work. Okay, management decision problem. So our management decision problem is the statement that is specifying the type of action required to solve the problem. So management comes to you and says, how do we increase store traffic? How do we get more people walking through the door? And you're going to turn that into a research problem after you probe, understand context, look at the symptoms in more detail. That research problem, right, is going to specify the type of information and how information can be obtained. So really, after all the probing, we want to know is, will adding sales promotions increase sales? So can we get more people in the door if we put on a promotional campaign? That's the underlying thing that we're trying to figure out. So here, what we're doing is we're looking at, okay, well, we could look at secondary data. If sales promotion, does that increase traffic for similar businesses? What type of promotion can that be? So here we are doing some more exploration, and we can focus on collecting data through surveys. If there was these type of promotions, would you be willing to purchase? How likely would you be willing to purchase? We can collect that type of information. So the wording in our research problem is going to indicate the type of research that we're going to do. So we would phrase it so that it makes sure that it kind of specifies whether or not we are doing test marketing, right? So whether we're going to try it out somewhere and see if people attend, whether we're going to do more observational research and watch people's behavior, whether we're going to conduct a survey. So our research problem really should have wording that indicates kind of what type of research we're going to do. But it needs to be something we can test. So our managers really care, really not just traffic, but they really care about the underlying issue here is sales. So we're converting it to a research problem about sales. We can test sales promotions. We can test changing the layout of the store. And so the way we word this research problem is really going to say, here's what we're focusing on. Here we're focusing on sales promotion, not layout, in terms of store traffic, in terms of sales. And we're looking at, will adding sales promotions increase sales? That's going to lean us more towards a test market or observational research as opposed to surveys, because it asks about adding sales promotions and people's behavior. It doesn't it's not about people's opinions or feelings, which would be more for surveys and focus groups. So the wording of the research problem is going to indicate what kind of research design we're going to do. So the idea here is to narrow the problem into something that can be researched, that we can create research objectives to know if we have been successful in our research project. So start with the management decision problem, which is generic. Get to the heart of what it is they really want, something we can measure, something we can test, and it will help direct us in terms of where we are going. Once you crafted here your research problem, before we decide to invest in us doing the research, we always want to determine if the research itself already exists. And so we have a tendency to assume that current data is superior to old data. So we're often eager to collect our own as opposed to using something that's been around or used for a different purpose. But we should make sure that there isn't information already that's much cheaper. Now, of course, we have more control over what information is collected, how it is collected with new data, right? It's much easier to work with for analysis, but there might be a lot of cost savings if you can get by with secondary data that was collected for a different purpose. So the other question is where do you find already existing information? We'll talk about that when we talk about secondary data analysis in a different later video. So we have converted our management problem into a research problem. In this particular example, we're looking at, adding sales promotions, increase sales, because that's really what they want when they talk about store traffic, more people coming in the store. They really just want to sell more things. So the question is if we have promotions, will that sell more? And if there is not data already available, then we're looking at building our own research project. And so before we get to that, we also need to know whether or not the question we're asking can actually be answered. Especially if you're doing this for a client, people are paying you to do the research. You want to make sure that you're not making promises you can't deliver on. So we want to make sure that you are successful when you conduct the research, that it is actually going to help them. So are you trying something new? Has similar information been gathered in the past? Can the information be readily obtained? One of the reasons that when we're working with a client, we ask, if we got this type of data, what would that help you with? What would that do? Is to make sure it's clear that that information would be helpful. And then the other piece to that is, can that information be obtained? Is that something that people would know if you gave them a survey, or they could answer it in a focus group or an interview? Is that something you could observe? You have to ask whether or not people will have that front of mind if people are asked about it. So is this information we can actually obtain and get people to tell us? So we got to make sure that if we do the research, it is something that we can be successful at. All right, so we have turned the management problems, go back in time here. Recognize the problem, find out why the information is being sought, understand the decision-making environment, use the symptoms to clarify the problem, translate that management problem into something you can do research on, determine whether the information already exists, determine whether the question really can be answered. If it is something that we can answer, we can design a research project for, we have fleshed it out so that we have that management decision problem can be turned into a marketing research problem, then the last step in the process here is going to be to state the research objectives. So we talked before about our example about how do we increase store traffic. That was what management wants. We worked with them and figured out what they really want is not so much more people coming into the store as they want more sales. And so our focus really isn't so much on store traffic here as it is sales. Okay. And so then we're looking at, will adding sales promotions actually result in sales? So then we turn that into objectives. Objectives are how you will know if the research project is successful. So it's going to define the specific information needed to solve the marketing research problem. So here we're going to be investigating the effectiveness of different sales promotions. We will know that our research has been successful if we can determine the effectiveness of different sales promotions. That's going to tell us, will adding sales promotions increase sales? And that will then increase store traffic. So we need to take the issue within the organization, turn it into something that we can research, where it's much more narrow in scope, which takes into consideration really the underlying issue, and then turns it into something that we can measure whether or not our research is effective and successful. So here, this is going to be something that the research project can do, which is going to be looking at the effectiveness of different sales promotions. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to have one location try a particular type of sales promotion, one weekend, and a different one a different weekend, and see which one leads to greater sales. So we're doing a comparison of different processes. So our research was successful if we accomplished the objective. And we need to make sure that that objective and that research problem give our organization enough information to make the decision. When you are stating a research objective, it should be as specific and unambiguous as possible. In other words, if we accomplish the objective, will you have enough information to make a decision? So you basically want to go back to the client or the boss and say, if we are able to determine the effectiveness of different sales promotions, will that give you the information you need to decide how to increase store traffic? Okay. Objectives are what the study aims to achieve, not the steps for how it will be carried out. So objectives are not step 1, step 2. It's how you will know if the research is successful. It's often stated in the form of a hypothesis, right? And a hypothesis is the if-then statement we talked about before. If we do this, then this. So if we have this type of promotion, then sales will increase. It's going to be used to determine whether the time and effort we put into the research is worthwhile. If you are doing this for a client, you want to make sure the client signs off on that research objective because that is how you're defining success of the research project, which is why you want to make sure it's going to create something usable for the organization that you're doing the research for. All right, so we have been creating our research problem and all the steps that it entails. And that is taking us through the first 5 steps here of this research process. In the next videos, what we're going to be looking at is some of the documents we would create, whether we are going external or internal, to start our research project. So we haven't got to the collect data yet. We simply are still defining what the project is itself. And then we will have videos on those documents and how to get the research project started. And then later we'll have videos in terms of designing the project, collecting the data, and doing analysis. So we're taking it one step at a time, just like you would if you were doing this research for your organization or for your client.